Like there's a lot of talent, in my opinion, in this interior offensive line bucket, the guard and center position, and some guys that have the positional versatility where they won't be pigeonholed to just one spot.
What's going on, everybody? Draft Network's scouting department here with yet another look at our first edition of the TDN100 for the 2023 NFL Draft, our consensus rankings of the top 100 eligible players. And in this conversation, we're going to be talking about lack of depth. We're going to be talking about position groups where we might have a little bit of concern as things currently stand and as we currently perceive this class. So, gentlemen, I want to start with the linebacker group. This was one of our scarcest positions across the TDN 100. You have a couple of really exciting names at the top, but then you have a pretty drastic drop-off as far as what follows those top three names. Joe, I'll start with you. When you think about this linebacker group in general, what's your level of concern and how much optimism that you have that we might see the blanks filled in this season?
Well, I guess what excites me about the linebacker class is we do have some really nice players in Henry To'o from Alabama, Trenton Simpson, Clemson, Noah Sewell, Oregon. And then, like you said, it's very much open season when it comes to that next tier. Maybe Muhammad Diabate from Utah can have a big year kind of stepping into that Devin Lloyd role. But we need guys to emerge here. That's absolutely a certainty this year. And, you know, there's some interesting players like a Jack Campbell from Iowa and Nate Herbig over there from Wisconsin. But those are guys that need to kind of bounce back. And then you think about a guy like Edifwan Folioshio. He's a guy that you want to see healthy, and he's not healthy. So it's just there's question marks with beyond the top three. The season's right in front of them, and we just need guys to emerge, and it's all right there. It just needs to happen.
Keith, yeah, I agree, but Joe, I like your take in the sense of the fact of guys emerging, right? And when that question was presented, Kyle, I started thinking about last year's draft immediately, right? And guys that really filled out their draft. When you talk about your Chad Mumas and, you know, even a Damone Clark, right? Even the rise that he was able to take from his previous year to this past year and how he was able to elevate his draft stock before the injury. But even Brian Asamoah of Oklahoma, those were all names that we didn't know entering the season, right? We were not really aware of those guys and thought that they would play as solid day two picks, but they emerged exactly, you know, what we needed in this draft class. And I'm somewhat excited about it just because we have the three names that Joe talked about. But yeah, there is a big gap. But I'm also expecting some guys to pop up on our radar and perform well to fill out the rest of the linebacker class.
No, and I agree with both Keith and Joe, you know, with their sentiments. And for me, I'm really excited for the fact that there is a lot of uncertainty, right? Because to me, uncertainty creates intrigue. And you think about as we get through the season, we got guys, you know, like Oregon. You know, we talk about Noah Sewell, but his teammate Justin Flo. The young man is extremely talented, a physical hitter. He's athletic. He's just battled some injuries. But man, if he can stay on the field this year, that's a name that we're going to hear a lot as we get into the draft season. DeMarvin Overshown at Texas. I'll even go to, you know, you think about Ventrell Miller over at Florida. He's playing in the SEC. He's going to be tested quite a bit this season as well. If he can put the right things on tape, he can be a name that injects himself into the linebacker conversation. So there, even though it's right now, it's more top heavy and we're waiting for the season to get to the meat and potatoes of it to see where these other guys come from. There are names out there that the fans and everyone else should be aware of that can really catapult themselves with good seasons.
Yeah, the other name that I want to inject here too is Jack Campbell from Iowa. Campbell had 2 votes amongst this panel, both in the late 80s. So he was a guy who was kind of perceived to be fringe. His play took a step back last season. I'm really interested to see if he can harness his previous play, because there was some real enthusiasm about Jack Campbell as a prototypical sized linebacker who could play a little bit in space, maybe not a truly dynamic turn and run and play man-to-man and carry 3 strong vertically up the middle of the field, which is always the challenge that teams are facing with the speed that offense is put into the 3 strong position. But Jack Campbell, at the very least, is another name that I think is worth injecting here when we talk about guys who might be able to help fill in that blank after those top 3 names. The next position group that I'd like to go, guys, and Damian, I'm going to start with you. is the interior offensive line class. We currently have 6 who made the cut, including a couple of guys that we got eyes on closer to the end of the cutoff for cross checks, including Cedric Van Pran from Georgia. But with only 6 names that made the cut, it's still one of our lightest groups. So, Dane, when you think about the interior offensive line group, what stands out to you? And do you have the same optimism that we seem to have at linebacker and some of those blanks getting filled in?
I do, Kyle, and I think because one thing we know is that once we get to the draft season, there are going to be a lot of tackles, or there will be tackles that played tackle at college that will be projected to guard as we get closer to the draft, obviously because of measurement and arm length and things of that nature. With a guy like Aaron Frost over at Nevada, who's played well at right tackle, he has the demeanor of a guard, the finishing and physicality of a guard. And if the measurements that I saw when I did his scouting report are true, he's going to have the arm length of a guard. And it's like, okay, we're going to bump him inside. And you think about the guys at the top, your guy, John Michael Schmitz, and Andrew Voorhees, who I really, really loved watching him play, Emil Ekiyor, and then, of course, the Kentucky transfer from Auburn, Tayshawn Manning, Ricky Stromberg. There's a lot of different guys. And you brought up, Van Pran and I forget the Branklin's name at the moment from Wisconsin. Joe Tipman, 6'6", 320 center, who could play some guard also. There's a lot of talent, in my opinion, in this interior offensive line bucket, the guard and center position. And some guys that have the positional versatility where they won't be pigeonholed to just one spot.
Yeah, you talk about the talent, Dame, the distribution of ranking. Voorhees, the only player in the top 32, and he's also the only player in the top 64. You have to get to 65 and 66 to get Emil Ekiyor, as you mentioned, and John Michael Schmitz. And Keith, I'd love to hear you talk just a moment about the 2 Bama kids inside, between Ekiyor and Jayon Cohen, and what they bring to the table, and what's the ceiling for those guys, where they're obviously very talented, but they played on somewhat of a porous Alabama offensive line last season for Bryce Young.
Yeah, I was actually, I think I was about to steal Joe's point with Peter Skoronski, but I'm going to go talk about the Alabama guys. But now I'll talk about Emil Ekiyor, man. You're talking about a high-level football player. And on the Alabama offensive line, let's face it, right? In their big-time games against Auburn and Georgia, they struggled. But I thought that he was their one bright spot on that interior offensive line, something that's so important for their quarterback. We talk about Bryce Young, him being a smaller guy and really needing that space up front to operate so he can have more space to see. So I thought he was a really good football player. Moving forward, I'm expecting really good things from him. And I think that he is a guy that we need to, highlight and soft circle as, hey, this guy, if he puts it together, he can slide into that second round, much like, last year, Ed Ingram, right? He went pretty much under the radar for most of the draft. And then come draft day, he was a second round pick. And I can see, from a height, weight, and size perspective, Emil Ekiyor doing the same type of thing, just sliding into that, back end of day 2 type of draft pick.
Joe, any final thoughts on the interior offensive line?
Let me shout out a name here, Osiris Torrance. He's now at Florida, came over with Coach Billy Napier from Louisiana, probably going to be their starting right guard this year. And this dude's he's a butt kicker, I'll tell you that, man. He's got a lot of power throughout his frame, heavy hands. When he's latched, when he can run his feet, he creates a lot of displacement. He's got some pretty decent movement skills. And so I'm anxious to see him take his game to the SEC because he was dominant at Louisiana. And I think he's got a real big opportunity here to showcase himself against a higher level of competition and be one of the household names in this interior offensive line class.
That sound you hear, everyone, is the sigh of relief from producer Chris Schubert that he wasn't going to have to slap the expletive tab on this video because Joe called Torrance a butt kicker. So Chris thanks you for that, Joe. And we thank all of you for checking out this video in regards to our first edition of the 2023 TDN 100, our consensus rankings for the top 100 eligible prospects for the 2023 NFL Draft. Swing over to thedraftnetwork.com to check it out. And make sure you check out the Draft Network for all of your football wants and needs as this season gets underway.